Hello builders! This is The Engine. I'm your host, Sasha Berry. The Engine is a show about building in crypto and with crypto. So whether you're already building in the space or you're just trying to figure out what this whole crypto, Web3, blockchain, on-chain thing is about, you're in the right place. Stick around, because today we're talking about building builder communities. And my guests are Angelo Alessio and Igor Lilic. My guests have been around crypto for quite a bit, and they know about building builder communities, and so there's a trove of knowledge there, and we dug into it. In our conversation, we touched on the relationship between decentralization and community. We got into the challenges of financial incentivization of communities. We touched on ethical considerations of introducing financial incentives. We touched on potential pitfalls of tokenization and the need for strong culture and product market fit prior to introducing tokens. We, of course, talked about the importance of in-person IRL events for crypto and for crypto communities. And we talked about the need for authenticity and creativity and boldness and long-term vision when building builder communities. So, a lot of good stuff there. Angelo Alessio is one of the founders of Build Cities, a global cooperative of startup cities. After serving in the US Army as an engineer officer leading tactical and strategic operations, Angelo started his career in fintech, and after a successful exit 2 years later, Angelo started building in crypto. And so now, as a founder of Build Cities, he's building this global community of builders. Igor Lilic is a real OG in crypto. He's been in the space for over a decade. He's a founder of Blackcomb Software, and he's been building at the forefront of DeFi for all these years. He has worked with some of the top projects in the space, such as Consensys and DFINITY. And more recently, he has been a co-founder of BreakOut, a Web3 community in Brazil. And we'll get right into my conversation with Angelo and Igor. But first, a quick word about the core contributors of the first season of The Engine, Threshold Network and Build Cities. Threshold Network provides a suite of threshold cryptography services. So if you're building an application that involves private data and trusting an intermediary won't fly, you may want to check out Taco, which is the only encryption and access control plugin that is end-to-end decentralized. So what is Taco for? Builders are using it in various applications such as seed phrase recovery, crypto inheritance, media libraries management, and even concealing in-game assets. And these are just some of the use cases. You can use Taco to build a decentralized password manager or location sharing plugin, or even a live streaming platform, or any other dApp that involves private data. So go to threshold.network, check out Taco documentation, and see how you can easily integrate that plugin into your dApp. Build Cities is a global cooperative of startup cities. The world is changing rapidly. Resources and expertise that are so needed to create businesses and innovation used to be locked into certain ecosystems for centuries. But now, these resources are flowing freely around the world, empowering local communities. Passports and visas may still limit our ability to travel, but we can teleport anywhere over Zoom and collaborate with our partners all over the world. Build Cities is creating a digital infrastructure that empowers this collaboration and innovation and connects builders from all over the world. Check out their website and see how in this new world, Lagos is not far from Los Angeles and London, and Nassau is right next to Phuket and Paris. You can join the community right now with your Discord login. You can also mint a Dream, which is a collaborative AI NFT that serves as a pass to the entire Build Cities ecosystem, including all of their IRL events throughout the year around the country. The link is in the description. The Engine is powered by Skylab, a community of Web3 builders. Between ourselves, we often describe it as AA for founders, except for we're not trying to quit being founders, quite the opposite. We're trying to stick with it. And it's always better with a friend. And it's even better when it's a group of friends that is building towards similar goals. We're all building in the crypto space. We're all going through these ups and downs. We're all testing each other's projects, giving each other feedback. supporting each other on social media, and just being there for each other through all of this. So if you're building in the space and if you're looking for a community that is supportive, kind, but also thoughtful and can give you some tough love on occasion, the membership is free, but it's invitation only. So fill out the form on the website and somebody will reach out to you. The link is in the description. And now let's get into my chat with Angelo and Igor. Okay, the engine is here and we have Angelo and Igor today, my Skylab friends. Yay! Great to have you guys.
Hello.
We have another gigantic topic today. As always, we're talking about building builder communities, and there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of controversy, and everybody wants to build builder communities in Web3. Community is a very overused word, and
Yes.
people understand all kinds of different things by community. So there's a lot to dig in here. But before we get into it, I always ask, what brought you into crypto? What was the light bulb moment for you? And what are you here for? Igor.
Well, first, thank you for having me on. Good to see you. Good to chat. Um, the light bulb moment for me was really the one time that I finally understood the Bitcoin white paper way back in the day. I think I had probably read it like 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and then one of those times it just kind of like clicked. Like, oh hey, like we've kind of solved for digital money. That's like pretty cool. Like this is an actual solution. I'm a computer scientist. I'm a software engineer, and it was kind of this general solution to this problem. And then it was like once you know like a better way, right? From an engineering perspective,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, why would I not pursue this better way? Um, and so that was the rabbit hole for crypto through Bitcoin, and then obviously the ecosystem evolved with Ethereum and so on and so forth, and so just sucked me in, and I've never been able to come back out, and I don't think I will.
It's interesting that it took you nine reads to really get it. I admit I only read it once, and that was more than enough for me. As in, I'm not claiming that I understand it, but I acquired some familiarity. Maybe I'll go back and read it at some point. But what is it that you got out of it on the ninth read that kind of was different?
If you really go through that paper, right? Like, for instance, one of the claims is that Bitcoin is a time stamping service that rewards with these tokens, but it's for time stamping. And then it's like, wait, okay, so what does that mean? And it's like, actually, we've solved for like a distributed metronome. Like every 10 minutes we can reliably have these blocks, um, and no one can mess with it. No one can uh, take it over. It's self-healing. If there is an attack on the hash power, for instance, after the difficulty readjustment, it will go back to within the expected behavior. The system itself is resilient, and so I think it was more like putting all of the components together and realizing like actually this thing is going to outlive us all in some ways. Like Bitcoin itself will be here for my great 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 grandkids, and that's not something I can say about with confidence about many
Many
other
things.
things, but with Bitcoin specifically, I can say that with pretty good confidence. And so that kind of like aha moment of all of the components of the system built together to say like, oh, this is going to be here forever, was the thing that took a lot of readings to get to.
Mm. Yeah, so not just the money thing, but that money thing is sustainable essentially for all intents and purposes forever. Uh, yeah, that's crazy to think about because essentially 2,000 years ago, people used shells for money or furs. Even 1,000 years ago, people used furs and all kinds of weird things to exchange. And now we have this thing. That is crazy. Um, People on Arrakis in 8,000 years are going to be using Bitcoin. Angelo, you shared your story a couple of times before on the pod, but I would love to hear it again. What brought you into crypto, and what are you
Yeah.
here for?
Well, I'm not a computer scientist, and I could read the Bitcoin white paper 6 or 7 times and not understand anything novel or new, and be like reading War and Peace in a foreign language. So for me, I just it was kind of just trial and error of. Well, actually, it came up in a I was going to business school at the time. Very taboo, I know. I do have a business school degree but and work in crypto. But anyways, we were doing a case competition. One of the challenges or one of the ideas was to introduce Bitcoin payments. I think to like in Amazon or something. I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. Why would we do that? That doesn't make any sense. And then um, it kept kind of coming up, and then I was like, okay, well, what's this all about? And then again, I looked into it, didn't quite understand it, so then just ended up buying some Litecoin up until like I think like a month before the 2017 run up at the end of the year there, and it like doubled in a week, and I was like, oh well, cool. I mean, let me keep paying attention to this, and then you keep going down the rabbit hole, and so I think it wasn't like a light bulb moment so much as just like a continuously developing conviction, and then coming around to some of the same conclusions that Igor has is like this will exist way beyond beyond us. It could be potentially, interplanetary financial system. I mean, all these things, cross-border payments. It just, all the things that we kind of, all the similar talking points. I think I just started, it's just really developed conviction around, and so, yeah, now I'm kind of all in.
Love it. Yeah, it's interesting that financialization is always at the core of it, but it is so much more. And we will get back into the conversation about money and tokens and financial side of this whole thing, but we're here to talk about community, and both of you are building builder communities specifically. And both of you are focusing on international communities. So that's particularly interesting because yeah, of course, there's some level of adoption in the US, but in fact, adoption all over the world is bigger. And it's interesting to dig into why and how can we get there all over the world. So, Igor, will you give us a quick intro of your community now that you have built in Brazil?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, in some ways, I view all of Web3 as a big community. Uh,
Yeah.
Going back as far as like 2013 in this space, we've always been kind of shilling and building and growing, and so it's amazing to see how much has progressed in this more than a decade now. But yeah, specifically, I'm based in Sao Paulo, Brazil, um, and we have a community called BreakOut in Brazil, and we've thrown conferences, we've done meetups, we've worked with layer twos, we've worked with projects, we're connecting artists to platforms, we're connecting developers to projects, and basically, shilling in Brazil, and helping to kind of provide real air quotes real knowledge about what's happening in Web3 and how people can take part.
And you're focusing on builders and creators, right?
Yeah, that's right.
for the
So
most part.
obviously developers, you know, I have done DevRel professionally, and so growing developer communities is a big passion of mine. Getting developers onboarded, using the tech, building tools. Um, but I think Web3 can't just be about techies building techie things in a techie vacuum. I think if that ends up being the reality, then we've all failed. And
I was just
you
gonna
know,
say, no,
our
it can't. Like, I mean, that's what we've been doing for
Definitely
the
don't
most
want
part.
that.
yeah, yeah. Well, so that's why I think that's why we need to extend beyond just the echo chambers of software developers or whatever, and bring in. I mean, that's part of why when NFTs were the hot thing. Part of the reason it was so cool is because, hey, there was this other audience that was engaging and bringing a different perspective. Um, the crypto bros kind of ruined it, maybe, I don't know, but for a minute there, there was all these other people that were learning about a new technology, engaging with a new technology, finding new audiences, finding new patrons, etc. And so um, it was an enabler of a new sort of economy for a different set of people than just the tech bros, and that was exciting. And hopefully, we can find a way to find that spark again in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the tech bros or DGen farmers. Some combination of the two was not a very fruitful and nurturing ground for the artists. Somewhere there, artists got put aside, but some people stayed. I mean, I stuck around. I definitely came in through that NFT wave class of 2021, and seeing a different path for use, a whole different bunch of use cases around IP and managing IP on chain, and still excited about that. Um, Angelo, tell us about Build Cities.
I'm just glad to be on the same podcast as Igor as well for the community he's built with BreakOut. I remember learning about it and definitely want to go take a visit and see what it's all about down there, because I think it really kind of resonates with some of the stuff we're doing with Build. And yeah, I think so. There's kind of two things with Build, and I guess this kind of goes on like community philosophy. I'm kind of a big believer that like a community is a byproduct of like a mission, or some, doesn't even have to be a mission. It could just be like, hey, we love soccer, and so naturally a soccer club is going to form around this, our neighborhood soccer group or whatnot. Or like, you know, Musk, hey, we're going to go to Mars, so naturally he has a big kind of fan base and community, you could call it, I guess, that's on his own platform. And so for Build Cities mission, it's unlocking the hidden GDP in communities around the globe. And so kind of what that means is, we have this wonderful new technology with crypto that can actually, like, hey, provide risk capital to maybe a small business in, right, like an emerging market. Even completely new financial mechanisms for financing, maybe some kind of asset for something that can benefit community. Let's say energy, for example, or rural internet. So that's kind of our mission. It's a lot to kind of break down, and then I guess from like the product standpoint, we're really trying to not necessarily, like, we do have our own kind of community forming around that mission, but it's really more about finding the space and connective tissue between communities that are both like online, offline, in different cities, and applying and leveraging technology to kind of empower those a little bit more. So you'll notice kind of on our platform, we have a whole bunch of different communities and networks. It's just kind of letting people know what's out there. And then if you wanted to go deeper down the rabbit hole, we try to direct them down, hey, go check out BreakOut if you're in Brazil, or go check out Afropolitan if you're in the kind of African diaspora. And so that's kind of that's Build City's kind of positioning in this community space, I guess.
Build is such a broad and such a diverse beast, and that's where we kind of can touch on this idea of, well, what is a community? I mean, you just mentioned Elon's fans a community. I mean, are they a community or are they just fans?
Yeah.
Is Twitter a community or is it a PvP game?
Yeah.
Are DGens a community or are they just there for themselves and everything else can burn? And what to you constitutes a community, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I try, we say, you were mentioning it earlier, it's like an overused term. I try to, I try not to use the term too much because, and I wouldn't even say there's too much, I don't even know how to like fully define it so much as kind of what I mentioned earlier. It's like, hey, there's maybe a common mission, a common just thing common rally point that can bring at least one, at least more than two people. I'd say two people is a separate thing. That's like a friendship, a relationship, whatever. But like once you introduce the third or more person, it starts to become at least the early roots of a community, and they're probably gathering around for some reason outside just the sake. I mean, they might be just joining for the sake of being together, and that's perfectly fine too. But I think the ones that are kind of like compound and kind of last the longest are usually around some kind of rally point, whether that be ideological or interest based or political based. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of different reasons. I mean, billions really of different reasons why somebody would form and kind of come together to form a community. It's kind of a vague response, but yeah, that's how I view
it. Do you guys think that there is some overlap between the idea of decentralization and the importance of community? Is that why crypto is so attached to the idea of community? Is it a counterbalance to a authoritarian power, a power of community? Or is it an element of centralization?
It is an interesting question. I mean, authoritarians can be communities also, right? I mean, I think like history shows that groups of people can come together in a community and exert centralized power and exert top-down command and control. And so it's interesting this idea of like community versus decentralization. I think at least for me, from the computer science perspective, like the decentralization represents resiliency, and it represents the ability for the network to sustain itself over time without those central points of failure, right? Central points of failure are oftentimes the places where the service crashes. I don't know, you're trying to buy something on Black Friday and the site gets overwhelmed. It's because there's a central point of failure that's falling over and can't process everything, versus the decentralized approach where there's more resiliency, that there is no single point of failure. And maybe that ties into communities when it comes to questions of like leadership or mission or drive, like what the North Star of a community is. um, you know I don't know like how deep into anthropology and sociology we want to get here.
Oh yeah,
But
let's
Very
go.
um, like I mean, they're like cults of personality, right? Those are communities with a centralized kind of leader. If we think of North Korea, right? Like North Korea is always in the news, and everyone always knows that like North Korea is run by a regime, with this cult of personality leader at the top of that regime, and so that's a community, right? Um, it's kind of top down, command and control, but nevertheless, it's a community, versus versus what's a good example? A faith-based community,
Well,
right,
Ethereum.
can kind of yeah. Well, there you go. Ethereum as a community that has been able to scale across the world, um, into this kind of like community. It's like I'm a member of the Ethereum community, but it's not like I uh, check in with like the community, and say like, hey, do I have to renew my membership or not? You know, I can like go to DevCon and hang out with people, but I could also like not do that and still be a part of the community. Um, so, so yeah, I don't know if that answered anything. Just some thoughts.
So I guess the question is that what kind of communities do we want to build within crypto? I like the point that you brought up about more centralized and authoritarian communities. Those for sure can be oppressive and horrifying and dangerous. And that's not something that we want to optimize for. And so as a crypto community, as a builders community, um, how do we build a community that doesn't slip in that direction?
I think and this is kind of, I'm in the US, so I'm thinking through this kind of, American lens. I think there's this just generally resounding feeling that it doesn't really, feel like we the people anymore. Like um, in in this, it's kind in several. I think that wouldn't even just extend. I know that's kind of like U.S. specific reference, but like that that's what's been lost, right? That's a big part, I think, of that's what's been lost. That was easier to retain in earlier times when just like there's kind of more. We were forming the identity of the US as it was, kind of being, in the earlier, in the first 100 years or whatnot. We're at a point where it doesn't really feel like that anymore, and so I think kind of like the natural kind of relief valve of that is a lot of times a lot of the things that we do, again, share on the internet. We write our deepest thoughts and on blogs and Twitter. Like, you might not feel comfortable sharing your Twitter thoughts or your essays or blogs, those thoughts at like like your local neighborhood bar, right? It just might not be something that you want to be sharing out there, right? And so I think the fact where crypto then becomes, it's one thing if it's just a voice and you're able to kind of like write the essays, have these thoughts out there, but it doesn't necessarily bring that feeling back in of we the people. When you start to add in real clout in the terms of financial capital, um, cultural capital, when you think about, kind of like the media lens a little bit. And now, increasingly so, political capital, it starts to become very real where it's like, oh, cool. Like, my voice is now attached to this network or protocol that's like, has $1 trillion, or like we just, we we almost bought the Constitution, right? Like, which and it's just, yeah, it starts to become very like, hey, that voice is restored again. Um, and so I think that's kind of, in decentralization, a natural part of that narrative where it's like decentralization is kind of like that is the counter to this lost feeling of we the people. And then when you add the color to it of different communities, different expressions of that decentralization, I think that's where that's why you're seeing, so many of these kind of communities just becoming kind of the main, or at least, kind of the main focal point for organization, coordination, build. We think a lot about this through like literal economic ties, and markets, very kind of like market centric view for smaller businesses. So yeah, I think they definitely play hand in hand. And you can look outside of even the crypto tech stack to see that, right? Like, um, you know, Substack is a decentralized journalism, so to speak, in a way, right? YouTube was a decentralization of Hollywood, kind of. Um, and Yeah, I mean, those creators, they all kind of form communities, kind of quasi communities slash fans. And yeah, now I'm going too many directions, so I'll stop there.
But it's I love it. Thank you for kind of throwing that bridge over to financialization and what you were talking about, how we the people, in a way, crypto is giving the voice a financial weight,
Yeah.
and money talks,
Yeah.
and it allows the community to express its
Yeah.
power in a more visible and noticeable way. Now, when we that's sort of when we talk about the broader community of crypto, and in its relation to broader society and government. Now, within crypto communities, separate communities, within protocols or chains, the whole idea of financialization and financial incentivization is a huge can of worms.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of communities struggle with this competing ideas and kind of different vectors that pulling them in different directions, where there's a mission that you want to create and there's actual commitment of individuals to build together, and then there is the financial incentive that can be introduced through tools that crypto gives us. And there are few communities that have been successful in aligning these, but more communities, I feel, fail to align and allow for the financial
Yeah.
incentives kind of to, well, undermine or corrupt the broader idea of the community. And so, specifically within your communities that you guys are building with builders, how do you think about incentivization, financial incentivization? Are you introducing tokens? How are you thinking about it? What's the strategy there?
I think any Web3 community at some point will have, whatever, a leadership or a group of the people within the community. At some point, someone will float the idea of a token. Like, hey, we should do a token. That token should do XYZ or XYZ for Canadian listeners. Um, and, there will be this kind of debate back and forth over whether or not a token is necessary, and if we deem it necessary, what that token actually does, and so on and so forth. It's a very complicated question, and I think, for something like BreakOut, which is a community, it's educating people, creating connections, bringing people together over a common set of interests, and trying to build a culture of knowledge sharing, etc. What tends to happen a lot in Web3, in these tokenized communities, is a lot of PvP. And for those who don't know, PvP is player versus player. That's when you're in a game that has an environment where you're supposed to be collaborative, like World of Warcraft. You work together in a team to kill the monsters. But sometimes you can instead, flip on the PvP flag and you fight each other, right? Till one of those characters dies or whatever. And so crypto is a lot of PvP. A great example, I think, was in the DeFi summer Olympus DAO. I don't know if you guys remember Olympus DAO, but Olympus DAO was
Oh
one of
yeah.
these yield platform DeFi platforms, and it had this meme of 3-3. So everyone in Twitter started to put open bracket 3 comma 3 close bracket, and what that was a reference to was prisoner's dilemma. And basically, prisoner's dilemma, you can cooperate or you can defect. And if both prisoners cooperate, it's a better global result. And so the idea, the meme that Olympus DAO was trying to propagate, and the meme that the community of Olympus DAO was trying to propagate was, okay, if we all cooperate, if we all 3-3, if we all stake, and nobody takes their stake out, etc., like all of this will just be great for everyone involved, right? And for a while, and here's the tricky thing about these things, like for a while they look like they're actually going to work, right? Until one person defects and creates this like cascading chain reaction of defectors, which then, and you could probably see it in the Olympus DAO chart. I remember
Yep.
watching it, in real time, and it kind of was the first domino that kind of collapsed DeFi summer, leading into the FTX collapse, etc. And so, I mean, even FTX is kind of an example of this also. The PvP nature of communities in Web3, I think, is one of the things that can really be a thorn in the side of a mission aligned, a vision aligned ethos, because as much as you talk about the virtues of a community, a new community, I think we've all been to a meetup or a conference where someone is talking about the virtues of their new community, and then they mention, oh yeah, and then we're going to have a token, and the token will help, do XYZ, and then we're all rolling our eyes because it's like this token is just going to all of a sudden be the silver bullet that makes this community more successful than any other community that has tried to do the same thing before. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think I like all experiments are fair, I believe, and I don't think the financialization of communities per se is a bug. I think we should be experimenting. Um, but at the same time, I also think like morals and ethics come into play at some point, and like some people do face real harm, right? Like a lot of these token games are zero sum. If you're the founder and you rug pull and you make, $1 million, well, your community has lost $1 million, right? It's not like you make $1 million and everyone else is neutral. It's like, no, the people that were trusting you, the people that were following you, are suffering real harm. And so, I think everyone just needs to be a little bit more careful. And in 2024, this is almost like too late to say all of this, right? Because how many Ponzi's
Why
have
so?
risen and fallen? How many rug pulls have happened? Um, but
Well,
yeah,
there's more to come, I'm pretty sure.
there's more to come.
So it's
Exactly.
never too late to say that people need to be cautious. And the crazy part with that, to me, is that even if the founder, we'll put aside the, clear fraudsters and grifters and ruggers, but even when the community and the founders are the most well-intentioned, And when they're really trying to build this thing, oftentimes in crypto, because of its sort of wild nature, the token may go wild and crazy and people start buying into it. And then with the market collapsing, everything contracts. There's no more buyers, everything collapses. And we have seen that with some rather well-intentioned communities. I mean, I think more or less that's what happened with a lot of NFTs, a lot of games, including, bigger projects. Like Yuga Labs, I think their apes went parabolic. And yes, of course, everyone was happy and people were, some people were taking profits, but most people were sticking around for even more. And then when the whole thing collapsed, the founders didn't rug, they didn't leave, but they couldn't do anything to really save the situation. It was beyond their power. And then the community stayed with these bags, losing real value and getting a lot of, bitter taste and salt from others and within the community. And so while at one point that financialization and that inflow of money was a great resource, and Yuga was able to raise crazy VC round based on all those evaluations. But then later, it kind of, there's nothing they could do about it. And it's turned on them a lot. And there are many, many, Yuga is just one of the most visible examples, but there's so many examples of that. And, and even more recent one, DGen, the token on Farcaster that people aped into and people ran to farm it. And now it's down. It's not dead, but there's definitely a bunch of people who are disappointed in it and are kind of like, man, what happened? So my question is, again, back to your specific communities. When you're building, how do you think about introducing, if not tokenization, then what are the incentives? Like, how do you incentivize builders to do the thing?
I mean, first of all, like, I think community business models are just kind of, I don't think they work that well for, like, let me take that back. I guess when we're thinking of like maybe like a VC backed model, if you're like trying to go in that realm, it's like, don't necessarily try to do a community based business, because it introduces all these weird dynamics where it's like, the kind of whoever's kind of like maybe leading or putting the most effort in, like it's very clear when like the profit incentives become introduced, and it's like, it kind of becomes like, it gets like a, you can see right through like these big mega churches, for example, when you see like, I don't want to name names, but like it's like, oh wow, here's this religious leader with a $60 million jet and like all this other stuff, and these poor souls like, and it's just kind of like it's like a weird dynamic, and it's like you can kind of, I think, you remove yourself from those situations. If you're in one, you can kind of see right through it. And yeah, so I think you know those like the business model itself, it shouldn't necessarily be about like the community. And like, sure, there's things like member dues, like, that's understandable, and we introduced those at Build. But the more that you're just trying to, I think it does start to become maybe a little kind of culty, or just kind of, and people are just, I think we're just like, people are way more nuanced than that, right? Like, it's in our name, build cities. If you go into a city, like talk to anybody, it's like, you ask somebody like, hey, what community are you in? They'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, I live in New York, I live in Houston, I'm part of a soccer club, and I'm also part of this, this drinking club over here, and then I got my family club, whatever. Like nobody kind of, it doesn't really it's not a thing. People just have way more in their kind of, the same that Igor was talking about. Is like, I don't check in with the Ethereum community. I kind of like, hang out in these circles, and then, you're over in these circles. So I think when you try to like, kind of like, make it like, these are my people, it's like, it just kind of blows up in your face, and it's just weird anyways. And it's not, you kind of loses the essence of it. So that's kind of like on the business model front. But I do think, membership dues, just kind of like things when it's like very honest, like, hey, we have software costs, or we have this building we got to pay for. Like, that's cost money. Like, let's go. Come on. Like, this is what it takes. And I think if you're just transparent with that those things can be, those things make sense and don't kind of perverse it at all. And then when it comes to the actual tokenization or the when token question, I kind of view that, well, first of all, it's like the only token you need is Bitcoin, so there's that. But but seriously, I view that as like
the Bitcoin Maxi made a
sure,
brief appearance.
yeah, and yeah, the PvP point Igor made, I could see how that gets weird. I saw that, I haven't actually been in too many kind of like NFT communities, or where like it was first that you buy in and then the price goes up, or it's all tied to the price. But it's only logical that that would have like short shelf life, and you'd be coming in on the same terms that you would find some fast friends if you were all winning a bunch of money at the craps table in Vegas. Like, you're gonna have a fun time and you're gonna part ways, and then that's it.
I love that
Yeah,
comparison for the degen
yeah.
community. That is great.
Now, so okay, so what does a right way look like? And I don't, I'm not going to pretend to know, because we haven't introduced. We have an NFT, which is the membership dues, membership, and it's just a one-time membership mint. And we'll introduce recurring ones that will actually pay for like. And by the way, all that membership proceeds goes back into the ecosystem, or 90% of it goes back into fueling, financing projects, financing small businesses, etc. But we do want to have a token at some point that represents, patronage. So it is more so like something that you would earn, um, very similar to like a co-op model, where, hey, we're all actually doing something to generate economic activity in our lives, and like we're kind of forming this co-op, and that's legally, that's how we're structured anyways. And so I
Hmm.
think the best kind of introduction of a token is, and again, it does introduce a lot of weird events. Like, I think Degen did a great job, right? Obviously, even the warps, but I think it should be a only after you've established some kind of culture market fit, or culture and product market fit, where that, everything is kind of solidified, and it really serves as like an afterburner, but not like the engine itself. So no pun intended with the podcast, but yeah, maybe we make another a byproduct series is called Afterburner, and that can all be the token degen stuff. But anyways, that's how I kind of view it, as like, place that on after you have this kind of critical mass and inertia going around, the stuff that's really tough to build. And that's like I think an authentic community, for lack of a better word, but group, org, whatever you want to call it. And then, yeah, that's how I view it.
Right. I think, was it you in one of the previous conversations we had, and was it you comparing tokenization with gasoline that you
Oh,
pour on a
maybe.
on a fire that is already
Yeah.
there,
I mean,
and if a community already has a fire, then it can,
I would definitely say something
grow and
like
be
that.
bigger.
Yeah,
I thought that was
I would definitely
interesting.
say something like that. That's also a very good analogy that I think, absolutely, yeah, pouring more gas on a, start the fire, do the hard work, get it sustainable, and then, you know, yeah, pour gas on it with a token if you want. That might not be the right strategy either. So, but it can, I think I could see how it could be effective.
And just to chime in with a little bit more on like what is starting the fire, right? I mean, I think the first thing you have to decide with a community is this a place that we just all want to hang out and spend time together, or is this something that we actually want to try and build into a business or a monetization scheme, or something that adds value? No, if it's the first one, then like cool, like Telegram group, let's do some Zoom calls, let's hang out. That's all great. But if you actually want to kind of create a business out of an idea, then at the end of the day, you have to create value, right? And so, what does creating value in a community look like? Well, if you're if you want to curate a community of builders, education content, like how do you build, what do you do, like making it easier for those, because anyone can go on the internet, and if they have infinite amount of time, can figure out how to do something. Like if I had an infinite amount of time, I could build a SpaceX rocket. I mean, it would take me probably like 3,000 300,000 years or something, but
I'm
like
not going to claim that.
no, if you had literally infinite time, you could, right? It's just like it would take a long time.
Yeah, maybe.
And so
Yeah.
creating value would be like, okay, here are the exact things that you need to learn if you want to reach this goal, and placing it in a way that's consumable, and that's that speaks to the language of the community. And that's like one path. Another path is creating opportunities, right? uh, Hey, here's this new SocialFi app that's trying to gain users, and here's this community of users that wants to try new SocialFi apps. Like, do a meetup and put them in the same room together and create ambassadors for that new SocialFi platform, or what have you. Hey, let's build a job board to connect software engineers in Brazil to projects globally. And those projects wouldn't have had access to the Brazilian market otherwise, or it would have been harder for them to find Brazilian, Web3 developer talent. And so these are things that, to start the fire, right? Like I mean, in 2024, starting a fire, all you need is a lighter, right? But if we go back, it required effort, it required friction, it required work to start a fire, throughout human history. And so in the same way, like it requires work to make something of value for people, and it requires consistency, and those communities actually need to be engaging and responding and finding value in those things that you're doing. And it's not always easy. You don't always have the exact right idea that everyone's going to be like, oh my god, like take my money. It's not like that, right? You have to work and iterate and keep going and keep trying until you build the audience, and have that conversation with that community about what they want. And then, yeah, once that fire is going and once it makes sense, then perhaps you can pour the gasoline in the form of a token. But one of the interesting things that also happens in Web3 is like, once that fire is going, a lot of teams choose not to do a token. So, like, there's a great article with the founders of Dune Analytics, and they've talked about doing a token before, and then at this point, their community is so strong, they have such good traction, they have such a robust platform, that they actually think a community token would distract from what they're trying to achieve. And so it's not always like a given that the token is going to be the thing that is the right accelerant for a stage that you're at. And so it's a very, very tricky consideration at times.
Just to touch on that too, that's such a good point. Like once that token's there, that's what you become measured by, right? Like, so if you're tying it to a price, that's what you are saying you're going to be measured by. And then when price go down, community go down. Like, like it's like that, That's
And
so why,
vibes go
yeah,
down.
vibes go down, vibe down, price down, vibe down. That's a better way to put it. But like that's whereas, I mean, what do we do in economies today? Like we measure by GDP. It's like how much product are we gonna? And you could argue. I mean, you could even introduce the question: is that a good measure of an economy? There's, I think, Bhutan, the Kingdom of Bhutan, measures on. They take into account like happiness, some kind of happiness quotient.
Yep.
Which also I could see get weird as well, but like at least it's like hey, there's different potential, like what you it's kind of like just like in startups you have a KPI. Maybe if we're just more transparent that the token is tied to this KPI and not just some kind of price, you might get some more like sustainable, like kind of longer form communities that can kind of like, oh, this is something that we actually have to work towards. It's not just like where the markets go, right? Because the markets will probably kind of like crush most coins anyways, right? I think if you look at, not to bring up Bitcoin again, but if you look at all the Bitcoin adjusted price, like everything is below it over the course of a long enough period of time. Like community building, so to speak, it's so counterintuitive also to maybe advice you've heard from like building a startup or anything. Like it's almost like you can't and not necessarily should like measure how your like community is doing, right? It's because it's highly personal. Like it's like there's so many things that you can't really measure, and so you kind of have to kind of like build it in faith that like the direction that you're going with it is the right one. And if you try to get too analytical about it, it just kind of, I think, kind of just starts to lose its alchemy a little bit, whatever that alchemy was to begin with. So that's very counter to I think kind of like maybe all the traditional kind of startup building advice we've been fed over the past, whatever, 2 decades or whatever.
It's interesting. And it's interesting that you bring up is basically you get what you measure for. And we still in crypto, we're very much attached to the financial output and the money. But then the other metric that is also very common is the vanity metrics of social media. Oh, this community has so many followers on Twitter. This community has so many followers on Twitter. And, set aside the algorithm and questionable, methods and tactics that people employ. But how do you feel? What is your thinking around the community's your community's presence in the space?
Yeah.
How do you make noise? How do you make yourself heard and present?
Yeah.
Is it Twitter? Is it Twitter forever?
No.
Really?
I mean, you have to have, so just to follow up and then I'll stop. But like to follow up on that, the point I was trying to make earlier, where it's like, it's a counterintuitive building process because like you can't fully measure. It's like, it's in the same method that you can't really measure word of mouth. You can only know how that's working by just people coming in directly or like organically to the product. And then if you don't necessarily even have a product, then it's just kind of like, I just have so much respect for like people who come to New York or whatever just to like start their writing career or their music career or just like a purely creative career where it's like you don't have any of those benchmarks. Like you're just putting out what you think is strong, and then and just seeing what kind of resonates. So it's almost like, I mean, I think even in building our community, it's kind of been like a even just like kind of like a self-reflective journey for like, hey, how where are we kind of going next? How do I figure out where we're going next? And I think like my ideal KPI, which is when I just can't measure it all, is if somehow somewhere somebody like got connected through Build or like came up in a conversation and they were able to like do a business deal together or start a new startup, and like I might be able to kind of like have a sense of that briefly if like we like host an event, but I want that to happen like anywhere where, and again, I just can't measure that at all, except through just like a lot of anecdotal evidence and anecdotes that just kind of like, hey, this is working as we have been trying to facilitate. And I guess retention can kind of show for that, but yeah, really, really hard to measure, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. That's a tough one. But going back to presence and being heard, I mean, it's interesting that you brought up creative people coming, to a big city in hopes of building their career. But for as somebody who has worked in creative industry for a good chunk of my career, I'm going to tell you now, getting a writing deal, getting a book deal, getting a label to have any interest for you, you still have to have those vanity metrics. It's almost, it's not almost, it is a requirement now to bring in your community, quote unquote, um, and built in community with your IP, quote unquote, um, to your potential distributor, label, or whatever, so that they have the confidence that you and your product is worthy of their time and investment. And it's on one hand, one may say that it is in a way democratizing it, because yes, you can go on Twitter, you can go on YouTube, and you can start putting out your work. You can put out Substack and get those hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but you have to do it on your own dime and somehow survive through that before you get support from an agency or a label or a publisher. Whereas in the olden days, you'd come in and get evaluated on the merit of the product itself and your presence or your performance, and then they'd take you somewhere. And so it's kind of, we thought that we're solving for gatekeepers, but really we're putting algorithm and platforms as an additional gatekeeper. And so as communities trying to reach and build audiences, how do you feel about your presence out there, and how do you reach people? How do you communicate?
Well, that's why we're building our own platform too, but I'll stop. So yeah, I'll let Igor chime in here.
Well, I would love to hear about it. Igor, what's the thinking?
No, I do think obviously it's important, right? Um, Outreach and amplifying voice and all these kinds of things. And I think it is doing as much testing and measuring as you possibly can to see what is resonating, and then going with what resonates. I think everyone in the world is readjusting. I like the algorithm has now become like this noun that we've always talked about like the algorithm and Facebook and all these kinds of things, but now I think there is this like this global meme of like the algorithm, like this one monolithic thing that exists, right? And I think we as a society are getting accustomed to this new reality, especially with AI and all these kinds of things. And so I think it's a period of extreme kind of volatility in terms of the expectation of what it used to be like in the olden days, as you said it, versus like what the new norm is. And so, I also think each project has to figure out like what success looks like, right? if the only thing that you define as success is as being a globally recognized brand with 5 million plus followers, for example, which is a valid goal. It's just that that kind of goal is a very, very, very difficult thing to achieve. But if your goal is, hey, within our network, we have been able to verify 3 seed round deals have been accomplished in this quarter or something. It's a much smaller scale goal. Um, but if that's what success is for the community, then that's great. Then that's okay. Well, then let's maximize for that goal. And so I think a lot of it is also setting goals, right, and actually not being blasé about those kinds of things, not being like, oh, whatever happens happens and I'll be happy or not. I think that can be a road to whenever you hit a milestone or a threshold, you then just like want that next threshold, and you never celebrating like, hey, we did achieve the milestone that we were going for. And so yeah, I mean, I think it's an adjustment period, and then I think in that adjustment period, you kind of fall back to the X's and the O's, what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to test, you're supposed to put out there, you're supposed to hear what your community or your listener or your customer is saying, you're supposed to incorporate their feedback, and keep testing new things out until you find a winning formula. um, all that while you're riding the wave of like the algorithm and what the algorithm means for society moving forward.
Yeah, I at some point had a short-lived TikTok channel during the pandemic, and I even recorded a little video about how the algorithm is this almighty God, which requires daily blood sacrifices because you're giving it time and energy every day. And if you don't, you will be punished. But if you do, you still don't know if you will be rewarded. And in that way, it's unknowable and mysterious, like any proper God. Um, but yeah. Well, so with your community, like, how do you communicate? Angelo, you mentioned you're building a platform. That's a bold and expensive approach.
Yeah. Yes. And it's I mean, I think, look, we want the community, or at least our the people that have, touch points or stakeholders, for lack of a better word, we have maybe nailed down that term, builders, right? We want to have a lot of touch points for our ecosystem. One way to do that, and what we've determined is the best way, is to also have our own platform, because then we do believe that more value can accrue to the platform itself, and thereby all the stakeholders, that come into it, right? We want to start bringing, mayors of small towns on board. We want to bring it so that they can have a direct line of communication with somebody in their backyard who's building fusion, or doesn't take them 300,000 years to build a SpaceX rocket or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we want to bring all those people in on the same platform. And you could argue, yeah, that's all on X. Find that on X, or you can find that on LinkedIn. But I think, because also the costs of software development are going way down, that it is very feasible to also, have your own platform, right? And so yeah, that was kind of a big piece of that. And sure, the other platforms kind of exist, but there's very specific things we want to do that those platforms don't have, right? Like we want them to be very kind of city specific because we want to like accelerate the time. Like our KPI is not eyes glued to the algorithm, which when you said it like that way, Igor, like it did have like a cloud of like, oh man, we do kind of say the around it. But yeah, our KPI, like it's much more about like, hey, like ideally having time spent in a building, not like a third space where people are collaborating, jamming, and economic activities being kind of distributed through that footprint, and it's not time spent online in the algorithm trying to figure out what to say, what to do next, but actually kind of helping folks kind of it would be, we're still kind of like figuring out exactly what that KPI would be, but it would be very offline and kind of almost like the inverse of what some of these platforms do today. And so, yeah, that required a level of customization that I think will just kind of ideally amplify our community efforts in the long run.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you mentioned how the cost of building platform is going down. And I immediately thought about Farcaster as a protocol that is there for people to build communities on top of and building clients on top of. And you could build a platform for communication for your own community and just have it there on top of a protocol. And that's something that Web3 crypto has achieved. And I think that's an interesting direction where, and we've seen it already where from the world of Facebook, where everybody was on it and everybody had to be on it to communicate. Now we have moved sort of back or to the side where we are much more active in smaller groups in our WhatsApp chats or Telegram chats, where maybe there's 1,000 people, but my favorite chats are up to 100 people, maybe 30, 50 people, where I more or less know who's who, what they're doing, is their contribution valuable, do they know what they're talking about? And that's what I want to tune into. And so creating these pockets after going all the way to the building a gigantic town square for the world, we're coming to realize that you can't really talk to the town square. You find a little group on the town square and you end up talking to them, and you don't have to be talking in the middle of the town square. You may as well go to a coffee shop next door and just have that conversation in the quiet and enjoy each other. So yeah, I think creating pockets and owning the spaces and owning and not depending on the platforms is actually a big hope for communication. And so with all of this, and with AI, and with the algorithm hanging over us, it seems that the biggest solution really is going back to IRL. And I know that both of you are strong on that direction, and you're building towards that too. So can you share a little bit about your thinking around that and how you're doing that, and how do you bring people back out into the world?
Yeah, I mean, we all went through a pandemic. We all were trapped inside our, work from home bubbles for 18 months. We all love, the idea of not having to commute an hour and a half each way to work, right? Like that's great. We've collectively saved ourselves a big chunk of our lives, not wasted, stuck in traffic, with high blood pressure because the guy that cut you off. So there are great things, but then like we also realized like, you know what, I actually like being around people, and I can't just. There's a great ad. There's a great commercial. I don't know what for what, but it's like three boys on a couch,
I love
and they're
that part.
playing the original Halo, and they're eating pizza together, and they're all together, and then it fades out, to the modern kid who's playing PlayStation with his headset, and he's alone in the dark. Um, and it's such a powerful visual for someone like me. Like, any guy I talk to who's my age, I could bring up like, hey, when you were a kid, do you remember those like Friday nights when everyone got together and played Nintendo 64? And any guy my age is like, yes, of course. Those are like formative, heartwarming memories, that I cherish deeply. Um,
Even
and
some girls can relate.
we use and some girls can relate to. Yeah, I'm not trying to imply that they can't, but uh, in any event, I think like IRL means something, not just like not just because we feel like we have to, but actually it's good for our mental health to be around people, and it's nice to experience that, and you can communicate information in ways that you can't online, and so on and so forth. And anyways, we're all in, you know 30 Discord channels and 20 Telegram groups, and it's hard to split your attention across all of them. But when you're physically in one location, like, you're physically in that location, and so, like, your attention is a little bit more focused. And so, yeah, IRL is huge. I think there's always going to be a demand for IRL. I think getting people together in one space, to exchange ideas, um, to teach, to educate, to learn, to hear from each other, to allow each other to communicate and talk, is always good. And so, yeah, I mean, we started BreakOut with a conference, right? So we had our first conference in Sao Paulo. It was about 600 folks, and people had a great time. And we had great speakers lined up, and the feedback was really, really excellent because, um, if you're able to get the ambiance right, and you're able to have good content and have great speakers, and if it's not too shilly, I think people that are motivated to be in your IRL experience are going to have a great time, and tell their friends and share with their communities, and so on and so forth. And so, um, I think it's going to be more and more important, as time goes on, is the IRL component. Um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more. And I know Angelo feels strongly about that too.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of have this thesis. If I wanted to do a fund someday, like about like this analog resurgence, I think you're already kind of seeing it a little bit now, where it's like, AI is only going to amplify this, right? Because especially like, why did we go to the internet? Why did we go to Twitter? Because we wanted a different place to talk about these different opinions and different things that maybe the traditional publication or media like wasn't covering or whatnot. I don't want to say it'd be complete inverse or like boomerang effect, but if so much of what's going to be generated online is AI generated or AI augmented, like deep fakes, etc., like we are naturally going to start to not trust that. I'm only going to start trusting Sasha when I see Sasha like in wherever you're at in the world, or Igor in Brazil. Like I will only take that. I will reassign weights of like my relationships much higher on that realm when it's like very difficult to start discerning what's real, what's not, right? Um, and I think it's the same for a bunch of other things, right? I think like people who have Pelotons will just realize like I could just buy a bike and go biking. I think even as Spotify, I think there's some stat with like Spotify, proliferated vinyl record sales also went up, right? Like so just, and that kind of goes back into like, having these experiences. But yeah, I think At the same time, it's not like, I don't even know if it'll be like a complete boomerang. And so for build, we kind of very much trying to figure out what's the parallel experience, right? Like right now we are basically we're on this video call. I view this Zoom like interface Riverside. This is like commuting, right? Like we are commuting to a common area without having to buy plane ticket or train ticket. And we even have video conferencing in build, and that's kind of like, hey, we just want people to kind of like, it's just another door, like it's just another coffee shop that like, hey, hello Sasha, hello Igor, like good to see you. Okay, goodbye. And now I'm gonna go have a coffee or a beer next door to this place. And like we want that experience to be like almost in parallel, so it doesn't feel bifurcated. I'd be very bullish on like holograms, like the actual kind of Star Wars ones where it's like you could be here, and like I think that would be cool, and not, that would be less dystopian than I think some of the other stuff that's out there. Like that's less dystopian than the metaverse to me, where it's just like, hey, we're doing our thing and it's no different, and there's kind of like these parallel worlds. So that's how we think about it. But yeah, big emphasis.
I like the AR idea.
Yeah. I think they have the concerts.
You made me have this thought. Oh, I was just gonna say, you made me have this thought, like in the future the Zoom calls will be our AI avatars representing us at the Zoom calls, and then like the real us will be at the bar having a beer while our AI avatars are doing
do the work, do the coordination. Probably.
That's hilarious. Well,
that's hyperscale. That's a lot of scale.
I mean, I don't mind my AI agent taking care of scheduling for me to go to a bar and have a beer with you guys. I don't mind that. Well, we are way over time, and I don't want to keep you. I know you guys have to go do things and build things. But to wrap it up, just quick word of wisdom for, every cycle, crypto is building communities and building communities differently. And so as we are in this cycle with all the knowledge and experience of the previous ones, do you have a quick word of wisdom for community builders or community participants, how to build or how to join communities?
I will just say,
stay safe.
Stay safe.
Buy Bitcoin.
Yes.
Stay safe and buy Bitcoin. Okay.
I would just say I think there's like the more I do this, the more we've been doing this, like the more it's just like I just don't really ascribe to any playbooks anymore. I just kind of like, there's literally no playbook for this. There is, and there's reference points and there's inspirational points, but there's no playbook, I'd say. And I would also just say, like, resist the temptation to like do what like the latest, trend is. It's kind of cliche, but like just stick to a plan, be like that Dune founder who was mentioned earlier, like, just kind of think through what you're wanting to assemble a community around, and what that means and what the values are, and then for joining, I think for joining, have breadth to understand what else is going on, and then but like, definitely don't try to spread yourself too thin. Just like pick one or two or three max. We actually hard coded the rule that you couldn't be part of more than 3 networks or 3 cities in the platform, because it's just like you can't actually contribute to more than 3, I think, with any meaningful intent. So go wide on the discovery piece, and then go deep on the ones that you find that's like, okay, this is where I want to join.
I love it. like committing and contributing.
Commit and contribute. Yes.
That's definitely
Nice.
That's definitely there. Igor.
Yeah, I want to plus one the playbook comment. I mean, that's where the creativity comes in. You have to be creative. You have to try new things. You have to be willing to. You have to be willing to try, right? Like, it's amazing how many fortunes have been made in this ecosystem by doing something a new way that no one else had done before. And once that first person does it that new way, it's almost like, oh, that was obvious. Why did no one else see that? Why wasn't that I can't believe that was never done before. Well, it's like, okay, well, the opportunity was there for anyone to try it in a new way, and then this is the person that did it the first time. And so, that's how it kind of works. And so creativity is a huge aspect of this. And then, so I was kind of joking about the Bitcoin thing, a little bit, half joking, but the staying safe part, I'm definitely not joking about. I think, like, in every cycle, particularly when it's a bull, when the charts are going vertical, it's very easy to get overzealous. It's very easy to think that everything's going to go up forever. It's very easy to look for shortcuts, and it's very easy to look at the person to your side and just say, oh, they're getting rich or whatever. I deserve. But, like, in every bull market, in every cycle, there was, like, the person that bought at that very top, right? There's the person that made the trade at the all-time high. Somewhere out there for each cycle, that person exists. And
Yep.
What goes up oftentimes has to come down. And so, I've been in this place in crypto for a decade, and I think, like, I'm not saying it's strictly wrong, but, like, I think if financial motivation is your only motivation for being in Web3, I think I've seen that be a path to burnout, versus folks that have been here with longevity. They do have more of a meaning, and they do have more of a mission, and they do believe this technology is can be a force for good in the world, and they do want to empower other people with knowledge and so on and so forth. And so, if you find yourself drawn to this ecosystem just for this kind of strong desire to make it rich or whatever, be extra careful, because a lot of folks can get burned that way. And so, that's why we say DYOR. So stay safe out there.
Yeah, for sure. And with joining communities too, because when you become part of this community that has this vibe and everybody feels that, oh, we're going to all get rich, we're all going to make it, that's one of the more dangerous slogans there, because the truth is that some are going to make it, all will not, especially when it comes to these speculative games. Somebody will be left without the chair at the end of the musical chairs. On that note, cautiously optimistic, this is a really fun chat, and I appreciate you sharing your experience and your knowledge. Always fun talking to you. I hope to have you on again, and have a great day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sasha. That was great.
Thank you.
That was a hell of a chat. For more of these, follow The Engine everywhere, on YouTube, in your favorite podcatcher, on all the social platforms, Twitter, Farcaster, LinkedIn, but don't just follow, leave us a comment. Tell us, how do you think about building communities? What are the most important things? Where do you begin? How do you introduce tokens? Do you introduce tokens at all? Check out Skylab and apply to join. Check out Threshold.network and Taco Access Control plugin. Check out Build Cities, mint your dream NFT, and join an event. All the links are in the description, and that's our show for today. Thank you for tuning in. Struggle well, fellow builder. You can do it. Cheers.